The West Highland Line through the Scottish Highlands has often been called one of the greatest railway journeys in the world. And while the sections to Mallaig and Oban are famous across the globe, many railway enthusiasts believe the journey from Crianlarich to Fort William is perhaps the most dramatic part of all. This is where the railway truly enters the wild highlands, a land of towering mountains, vast empty moorland, deep glens, remote stations, and scenery so breathtaking it almost feels unreal. For rail enthusiasts, this route is far more than simply a train journey. It is an unforgettable experience. And today, we're travelling north from Crianlarich to Fort William, along one of the most beautiful and atmospheric railway lines ever built. We'll explore the history of the line, the engineering challenges of constructing it through some of Britain's harshest terrain, and the incredible places along the route that make this railway legendary among rail fans around the world. Our journey begins at Crianlarich. Nestled among the mountains of Perthshire and Stirlingshire, Crianlarich is one of Scotland's most important Highland railway junctions. Here, the West Highland Line divides. One route heads west toward Oban. The other continues northward through increasingly remote country toward Fort William and Mallaig. For generations, Crianlarich has been a busy railway interchange deep in the Highlands. Steam locomotives once paused here to take water and coal, while passengers changed trains beneath the shadow of surrounding mountains. Even today, there is still something wonderfully nostalgic about Crianlarich Station. As our train departs northbound, the line immediately begins climbing into spectacular Highland scenery. Within minutes, civilization seems to disappear, roads become quieter, settlements become smaller, and the mountains begin to dominate the landscape completely. The line soon reaches Upper Tyndrum. Interestingly, Tiny Tyndrum is famous for having two separate railway stations. Upper Tyndrum on the West Highland Line to Fort William, and Tyndrum Lower on the Oban branch below in the valley. It's one of the smallest villages in Britain to have two railway stations. And already, the scenery surrounding the line is becoming extraordinary. The train twists through rugged mountain landscapes with sweeping views in every direction. This section of railway was built during the 1890s by the West Highland Railway, an extraordinary engineering achievement considering the terrain involved. Building railways through the Highlands was enormously difficult. The ground was unstable, weather conditions could be severe, and much of the landscape was incredibly remote. Many critics at the time believed the railway would never succeed financially. But despite the challenges, construction pressed onward. And what emerged was one of the most scenic railway lines anywhere on Earth. Soon after Upper Tyndrum, we arrive at one of the most famous features of the entire West Highland Line, the Horseshoe Curve. This remarkable section of railway curves dramatically around the mountainside near Bridge of Orchy. The reason for the curve was surprisingly simple. The railway company could not afford to build an expensive viaduct across the valley, so instead, engineers designed this great sweeping horseshoe-shaped curve around the contours of the land. For railway enthusiasts, it's a spectacular piece of railway engineering. The train curves around the mountains beneath the towering bulk of Bain Doraine, one of the most recognisable mountains in the Highlands. And the views here are astonishing. Wide highland glens stretch into the distance, while waterfalls tumble down hillsides and clouds drift across mountain peaks. It's the sort of scenery that railway enthusiasts dream about. As we continue northward, the train reaches Bridge of Orchy. This tiny station feels wonderfully remote. Surrounded by mountains and moorland, it has become one of the most photographed locations on the route. The station itself has changed little over the decades, retaining much of the atmosphere of Highland rail travel from another era. And this is one of the things that makes the West Highland Line so special. Unlike many railways modernised beyond recognition, this line still feels deeply connected to its past. The old station buildings, the single-track railway, the crossing loops, the isolated halts, all combine to create an experience that feels timeless. Beyond Bridge of Orchy, the landscape becomes even wilder. The train now climbs onto Rannoch Moor. For many passengers, this is the highlight of the entire journey. Rannoch Moor is one of the last great wildernesses in Britain, a vast landscape of peat bogs, lowcans, heather, and distant mountains stretching for miles in every direction. And remarkably, there are almost no roads here. The railway crosses country so remote that for long stretches, the train feels completely alone in the wilderness. Constructing the railway across Rannoch Moor was an extraordinary challenge. The ground was so soft and boggy that engineers feared the line would simply sink into the peat. To solve the problem, the railway was effectively floated across the moor using layers of timber, brushwood and earth, spread across the boggy ground beneath the tracks. Even today, this remains one of the most remarkable engineering achievements on the British railway network. The atmosphere across Rannoch Moor is unlike anywhere else. In summer, purple heather stretches across the landscape beneath endless skies. In winter, snow and ice transform the moor into something almost Arctic. Mist and rain create scenes of haunting beauty, while on clear days the mountains seem to stretch forever into the distance. And throughout it all, the railway threads its lonely way northward. Few railway journeys anywhere in Europe feel this remote. Eventually, the train reaches Rannoch Station itself. This isolated station sits surrounded almost entirely by wilderness. For decades, it provided one of the only access points into the remote interior of Rannoch Moor. Even today, arriving here feels like stepping into another world. But if Rannoch feels isolated, Corrour feels even more remote. Soon after leaving Rannoch, the train reaches Corrour Station, often described as the most remote railway station in Britain. There are no public roads to Corrour, no nearby town, no village, only mountains, lochs, moorland and wilderness. Passengers arriving here step directly into the Highlands themselves. For railway enthusiasts, Corrour has become legendary. The station gained worldwide fame after appearing in the film Trainspotting, but long before that, it had already achieved almost mythical status among rail fans and walkers. This is railway travel stripped back to its essentials. One lonely station in the middle of the Highlands. Just beyond Corrour lies the summit of the West Highland Line, over 1,300 feet above sea level. From here, the line begins descending northward toward Fort William, and the scenery somehow becomes even more spectacular. The railway passes above Loch Traig, offering magnificent views across the dark waters toward distant mountains. This stretch of line feels almost cinematic. The train curves along hillsides high above the loch, while mountains rise dramatically in every direction. For photographers and railway filmmakers, this section is paradise. And what makes the journey so special is the constant sense of movement through changing landscapes. One moment, the train crosses open moorland. The next, it threads through rocky cuttings or emerges beside glittering highland lochs. Then suddenly, distant mountain ranges open up beyond the windows. It's impossible not to be captivated by the scenery. As the train continues descending, we eventually arrive at Tulloch Station, another wonderfully isolated stop deep in the Highlands. And beyond Tulloch lies one of the hidden gems of the entire route, Monessie Gorge. Here, the railway clings dramatically to the side of a rocky canyon while the river rushes far below. The engineering here is extraordinary. The line squeezes through rugged highland terrain in scenes that feel almost untouched since Victorian times. Soon after, the train reaches Speen Bridge. This area is closely associated with Highland history and the nearby Commando Memorial, which overlooks some of the most spectacular mountain scenery in Scotland. And now, for the first time, Ben Nevis begins to appear. Britain's highest mountain towers above the surrounding landscape as the train approaches Fort William. After hours travelling through some of the wildest scenery in Britain, the arrival into Fort William feels almost triumphant. Fort William itself became connected to the railway in 1894 when the West Highland Railway finally reached the town. It transformed transport and tourism in the Western Highlands forever. Today, Fort William remains one of the great railway destinations of Britain, a gateway to Ben Nevis, the Highlands, and the famous extension onward to Mallaig and the Glenfinnan Viaduct. For railway enthusiasts, the journey from Crianlarich to Fort William represents everything wonderful about scenic rail travel. Historic engineering, remote stations, mountain scenery, atmosphere, adventure, and an extraordinary sense of place. This is not simply transportation. It is one of the greatest railway experiences anywhere in the world. Few railway lines can match the sheer drama and beauty of the West Highland Line through Rannoch Moor and the Highlands. And whether you travel behind a modern ScotRail train, the Caledonian Sleeper, or simply watch archive footage of the great diesel and steam locomotives that once ruled these rails, the magic of the route remains timeless. Every railway enthusiast should experience this line at least once in their lifetime. Thank you very much for travelling with us on this incredible journey along the West Highland Line from Crianlarich to Fort William. We hope you've enjoyed this look at one of the world's most scenic and atmospheric railways. If you did enjoy the video, please do give it a like, share it with fellow railway enthusiasts, and subscribe to the channel for more railway journeys, railway history, archive footage, scenic rail adventures, and classic British railway action. And until next time, thanks for watching.